Deep in the shadowed jungles of ancient Asia, a prisoner awakens bound to the earth, feeling the first prick of something alive pushing upward. Bamboo, relentless and growing inch by inch through flesh. Welcome to the chilling tale of bamboo sprout torture, nature's slow and painful execution. Grab a cup of tea, take a seat, and let this story unfold its horrors. If you're gripped by the suspense, hit that subscribe button. Your support means a lot to us. Chapter 1. The Origins of a Gruesome Legend. Let's dive right into where this nightmare began. Bamboo sprout torture, often whispered about in historical texts and folklore, is said to have roots in ancient Southeast Asia, particularly during times of war and feudal punishments in regions like Vietnam, China, and Japan. Picture it as nature's own executioner, a method where victims were tied over young bamboo shoots, which grow astonishingly fast, up to 3 feet in a single day under the right conditions. The idea was simple, yet diabolical. The sharp, spear-like tips of the sprouts would pierce the body slowly, causing unimaginable agony over days as the plant fed on the victim's blood and continued its upward thrust. Historians debate its authenticity, with some accounts tracing it back to the 19th century during colonial conflicts, like French reports from Indochina describing it as a rebel tactic. For example, in one alleged incident during the Vietnam Wars, captured soldiers were supposedly subjected to this to extract confessions, the bamboo's natural strength turning a harmless plant into a weapon. Practically speaking, bamboo, like the Philostachys species, thrives in humid tropical climates, needing minimal care but exploding in growth with water and sunlight. Tips here. If you're ever gardening, remember bamboo's invasiveness. Plant it in containers to avoid it taking over your yard like an unstoppable force. But beyond the botany, what made this torture so psychologically terrifying was its inevitability. Victims couldn't escape. They watched and felt the plant's progress, hour by hour. Modern skeptics argue it might be more myth than method, exaggerated in war propaganda to demonize enemies. Yet surviving tales from POWs in World War II Pacific theaters lend credence, describing similar slow-piercing ordeals. As we wrap this up, think about how everyday nature can twist into something sinister that sets the stage for exploring the science behind bamboo's deadly speed in the next chapter. Chapter 2. The Executioner's Design. The bamboo torture wasn't just a random act of cruelty. It was a calculated spectacle meant to break both body and spirit. The executioners who devised this method were masters of fear, choosing their victims with purpose, often targeting spies, deserters, or rebels to send a message. Picture a lone prisoner, a defiant warrior named Kale, caught sabotaging an enemy camp in a forgotten war. He's dragged to a clearing at dawn, wrists and ankles bound with coarse rope, his body stretched taut over a patch of freshly planted bamboo shoots, their tips just breaking the soil. The executioners didn't need blades or fire. They let nature do the work, knowing the bamboo would pierce Kale's flesh within hours, each sprout a living dagger driven by the plant's relentless growth. Kale's tormentors would visit him, not to interrogate, but to mock, their voices low and taunting as they described how the bamboo would find its way through his skin, muscle, even bone if he lasted long enough. Historical accounts suggest executioners sometimes poured water over the shoots to speed their growth, ensuring the victim felt every agonizing inch. Kale, sweating under the sun, would have heard the faint crackle of the bamboo pushing upward, a sound like a whisper of doom. By nightfall, the first shoots had broken his skin, drawing blood that only spurred the plants onward. The method's genius lay in its patience. Death wasn't quick, often taking days, each moment stretching the victim's dread. This wasn't just about killing, it was about control. Executioners used the torture's slow pace to crush hope, forcing others to watch as a warning. In one tale, A village was made to witness a traitor's fate. The bamboo's progress marked by screams that echoed for 3 days. The psychological weight of knowing escape was impossible broke even the strongest wills. Kyle, in our story, clung to defiance at first, cursing his captors, but by the second day, his voice weakened, his resolve crumbling as the bamboo claimed more of him. This chapter of terror sets us up to explore the victim's desperate attempts to survive in the next part. Chapter 3. The fight for survival. Kale's body trembled as the bamboo shoots pressed deeper, each hour a battle against pain and despair. The torture's cruelty lay not just in its physical toll, but in the fleeting hope it dangled before its victims. Kyle, once a fierce warrior, now faced a relentless enemy that grew stronger with every drop of his blood. Historical records tell of prisoners like him, men and women who tried everything to endure. Some whispered prayers, others thrashed against their bindings, hoping to snap the young shoots before they pierced too far. Kale tried this, twisting his torso despite the ropes cutting into his wrists, but the bamboo was unyielding, its tips sharp enough to slice through muscle with terrifying ease. In one desperate moment, Kale focused on his breathing, shallow and ragged, trying to slow his heart and dull the pain. Stories from survivors, rare as they were, describe similar tactics. Some attempted to enter a trance-like state, detaching their minds from the agony, while others bit their tongues to distract from the piercing below. One account tells of a prisoner who sang old war songs to keep madness at bay, his voice carrying until it faded into silence. Kale too clung to a memory, a fleeting image of his sister's face, her laughter from a time before the war, to anchor himself. But the bamboo didn't care about his resolve. It pushed upward, indifferent, through his flesh. The executioners, circling like vultures, watched for signs of surrender. They'd seen it before. Victims who begged for death as the pain became unbearable, their spirits broken long before their bodies gave out. Kyle refused to plead, though his clenched jaw betrayed his suffering. By the 3rd day, infection set in, his wounds festering in the humid air. Yet the bamboo kept growing, fueled by his own blood. The struggle wasn't just against the plants, but against time itself, each moment stretching into eternity. This fight against the inevitable primes us for the next chapter, where the torture's impact ripples beyond the victim to those who witnessed it. Chapter 4. The Ripple of Fear. The clearing where Kale lay bound was no longer just a place of torment. It had become a stage, a grim theatre where fear was wielded as a weapon far sharper than any blade. The bamboo shoots, now stained red with Kale's blood, stood as grotesque markers of his suffering, their slow, relentless growth a spectacle that drew onlookers from nearby villages. Executioners didn't just want Kale's death. They wanted his agony to echo, to paralyze entire communities with dread. Historical accounts from ancient wars describe how such tortures were public. Deliberate displays meant to crush rebellion. Villages, forced to gather at the edge of the clearing, stood in heavy silence, their faces pale as Kale's gasps filled the air. Some turned away, unable to watch the bamboo pierce deeper, while others stared, frozen, knowing defiance could land them in the same fate. Among the crowd was Lyra, a young healer from Kale's village, her hands trembling as she clutched her shawl. She'd known Kale since childhood, his brash courage always a spark in their small community. Now, seeing him reduced to a broken figure, his body arched in pain as the shoots pushed through his back, her heart sank. Lyra's mind raced, torn between the urge to run to him and the fear of the executioner's spears. Historical tales speak of witnesses like her. Ordinary people caught in the torture's orbit, their lives altered forever. One record from a 19th century conflict describes a farmer who, after watching a similar execution, abandoned his rebel ties, haunted by nightmares of bamboo for years. Lyra felt that same weight. her healer's instinct to save Kyle warring with the terror of what rebellion would cost her family. The executioners played their roles with chilling precision. They didn't just guard Kyle, they patrolled the crowd, their eyes scanning for defiance. One, a scarred man with a crooked grin, would occasionally prod the bamboo with his boot, ensuring its tips stayed sharp, drawing fresh cries from Kyle that silenced the onlookers' whispers. The psychological toll was calculated. By the fourth day, Kyle's screams had weakened to moans, but the crowd's fear had only grown. Children clung to their mothers, elders muttered prayers, and even the boldest warriors in the village averted their eyes, their resolve crumbling. The executioners sometimes scattered rice over the shoots, a twisted ritual to feed the bamboo, amplifying the horror as the plants seemed to thrive on Kyle's suffering. This wasn't just punishment. It was a message carved in blood and fear, meant to linger in every mind present. Lyra, despite her terror, noticed something the executioners didn't. Kyle's lips moving, barely audible, forming words meant for her. "Don't break," he whispered, his voice a faint thread through the pain. It was a plea, not for himself, but for the village to hold strong. Historical accounts mention such moments. Victims, in their final hours, trying to inspire resistance even as their lives ebbed away. One story tells of a rebel leader who, during a similar ordeal, shouted defiance until his voice gave out, planting seeds of rebellion in those who watched. For Lyra, Kyle's words were a spark, but the weight of the crowd's fear pressed against her courage. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the bloodied bamboo, the executioners prepared for the torture's final act, unaware of the quiet resolve beginning to stir in the onlookers. This ripple of fear, and the defiance it sparked, sets the stage for the final chapter, where Kyle's fate and the village's future collide. Chapter 5. The Final Stand and Legacy. The clearing, once alive with the murmurs of a terrified crowd, now lay under a suffocating hush as the fifth dawn broke over Kyle's broken form. The bamboo shoots, now grotesque spires slick with blood, had woven a cruel lattice through his body, their tips piercing through his torso and emerging like jagged spears. Kyle's breaths were shallow, each one a laboured defiance against the inevitable. His eyes, clouded with pain, still flickered with a stubborn spark, searching the crowd for Lyra, the healer who carried his whispered plea. The executioners, their faces hardened by routine cruelty, circled him one last time, their boots crunching the earth as they checked the ropes and the bamboo's relentless progress. This was the final act, not just of Kyle's life, but of a spectacle designed to stamp out rebellion. Yet, in the hearts of those watching, something was shifting, a spark that would outlive the torture's horror. Lyra stood at the crowd's edge, her hands clenched so tightly her nails drew blood. Kyle's words, "Don't break," echoed in her mind, a lifeline against the despair that threatened to drown her. The villagers around her, once cowed into silence, now exchanged furtive glances. An elder, his face lined with years of survival, gripped his staff tighter, his eyes no longer downcast. A young boy, barely 12, who'd slipped through the crowd to watch Kyle's torment, now stared with a mix of horror and anger. Historical accounts of bamboo torture often end with the victim's death, but they also hint at unintended consequences. Moments where the executioner's display of power backfired, igniting resistance instead of fear. One such tale from a 19th century rebellion describes a village that, after witnessing a comrade's slow death, organized a quiet revolt, their anger simmering into action. Kyle's suffering, though meant to break the village, was becoming a catalyst. The executioners, oblivious to the crowd's shifting mood, prepared to end the spectacle. The scarred leader, his grin now faded into boredom, knelt beside Kyle, taunting him with a low voice. "Your fight's done, rebel. No one's coming for you." But Kyle, summoning a strength that seemed impossible, lifted his head slightly, his gaze locking onto Lyra. With a voice barely above a rasp, he spoke not to his tormentors but to her. "For us!" The words were a knife cutting through the crowd's fear. Lyra's breath caught, and she felt the weight of his sacrifice. Not just his life, but his refusal to let the executioners win completely. Historical records note such final acts of defiance. A prisoner in a similar ordeal once spat at his captors, his last breath a curse that rallied onlookers. Cale's words, though softer, carried the same fire. As the sun climbed higher, Cale's breathing stopped, the bamboo finally claiming him. The executioners cut the ropes, letting his body slump, a grim trophy of their power. They expected the crowd to disperse, broken and obedient, but something unexpected happened. Lyra stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. "He didn't break," she said, loud enough for the villagers to hear. The executioners froze, their spears half raised, unaccustomed to defiance. The elder followed, his staff thudding against the ground as he moved to Lyra's side. The boy, eyes blazing, joined them, then another villager, and another. The executioners, outnumbered and caught off guard, hesitated, a fatal mistake. Historical rebellions often began this way, with a single act of courage sparking a fire. One account tells of a village that, after such a torture, ambushed their oppressors at dusk, using farm tools as weapons. Here, the crowd's anger surged, a silent vow forming. Cale's death would not be in vain. The executioners, sensing the shift, retreated, shouting threats as they vanished into the trees. Lyra knelt beside Cale's body, tears falling as she whispered a promise to carry on his fight. The villagers, no longer just witnesses, began to plan, their fear replaced by a quiet, burning resolve. Cale's torture, meant to crush them, had instead forged a rebellion. His legacy lived in Lyra's healing hands, now turned to organizing resistance, and in the boy who'd one day wield a blade in Cale's name. The bamboo, once a tool of death, became a symbol of endurance, its blood-stained tips a reminder that even nature's cruelty couldn't silence courage. This story of Cale's final stand ends here, but its echoes linger, a testament to the unbreakable human spirit. If you've been gripped by this tale, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and comment below. Your support means the world to us. Stay tuned for more stories that uncover the raw edges of history.